The moment Michael sat down across from her, something in the air shifted, like the faint hush that comes right before a storm. The cafe was warm and golden, filled with the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of cups, but between them, there was a silence so fragile that even a whisper could have shattered it. He had met countless people before, clients, colleagues, strangers, but something about Emily was different. She carried a calmness that was almost too perfect, the kind of peace that comes not from joy, but from learning how to live with pain. Her smile was gentle, but her eyes, they told a story he couldn't yet read. And then he noticed it, the thin gold ring glinting faintly on her left hand. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of healing, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Because this story is for those who know that love doesn't always come easy, and sometimes it arrives when we least expect it. When Michael first saw her at the community art class, she had been standing by a window, sketching something on her pad, a tree, bare and weathered, standing alone against a cloudy sky. He had found it oddly poetic. Over the next few weeks, their conversations began to grow, light at first, but layered with something unspoken beneath. He never saw her with anyone, and though she seemed open and kind, there was always a distance in her, like she had built invisible walls around her heart. He respected that, even admired it. But today, sitting across from her in that little cafe on Maple Street, he finally noticed what his heart had been avoiding all along. The ring. He wasn't sure why it bothered him so much. Maybe because he had started to care more than he meant to. Maybe because he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. His own past wasn't spotless either. A failed engagement, years of burying himself in work, and the quiet ache of loneliness that followed him home every night. Yet with Emily, something in him began to thaw. She had a way of making him see beauty in small things again. The swirl of cream in coffee, the warmth of sunlight through glass, the simple comfort of shared silence. But now, that ring caught the light like a truth he wasn't ready for. He tried not to stare, but his eyes betrayed him. And she noticed. She always noticed. Emily looked down at her hand for a long moment, as if deciding whether to hide it or explain it. Then, with a trembling breath, she spoke words that changed everything. "I'm a widow," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The world seemed to slow down. Outside, cars moved past the window, people laughed, the barista called out orders, but all of it faded into the background. All he could see was her, sitting across from him, fragile yet strong, her eyes glistening not from sadness but from a kind of acceptance that came only after loss. She didn't look for pity, and she didn't hide her pain. She wore it quietly like that ring, part of her, but not all of her. In the days that followed, Michael couldn't stop thinking about her words. "I'm a widow." The phrase echoed in his mind, carrying the weight of a story he didn't yet know. He wanted to ask, what happened? When? Who was he? But he didn't. Instead, he gave her space, showing up for coffee again, talking about art, music, and life's little absurdities, waiting for her to share when she was ready. It took weeks before she did. They were sitting by the lake one evening, the sun melting into the horizon, painting everything in gold. She told him about her late husband Daniel, a firefighter who had died 3 years earlier saving a family from a burning building. They had been married for 6 years, childhood sweethearts who grew up together, built dreams together, and then, in one night, everything was gone. For a long time, Emily said, she stopped believing in anything good. She couldn't sleep in their bed, couldn't walk by the station, couldn't even listen to the radio without hearing echoes of him. But time, as it always does, began to soften the edges. She learned to live with the silence, to find comfort in routine, to paint again. She told him that joining the art class was her first step toward living again, not just surviving. "I didn't expect to meet anyone there," she said with a faint smile, "but sometimes life brings people into our story when our hearts are ready to listen again." Michael didn't say much that night. He just listened, but something in him shifted deeply. He realized that love wasn't about filling someone's empty spaces. It was about standing beside them while they learned to breathe again. He admired her strength, the quiet grace with which she carried her past, and the courage it took to keep going. Over time, they began to meet more often. Dinners turned into walks, walks turned into late-night talks, and slowly they both began to heal, not because they were trying to fix each other, but because they were learning how to be whole again. There were still moments when Emily's eyes would glaze over, when she'd go silent for reasons she couldn't explain. Sometimes she would hold her ring absent-mindedly, lost in thought, and Michael learned to hold that silence with her. He never asked her to take it off, never asked her to forget. He understood that love, real love, doesn't erase what came before, it honors it. One rainy evening, months later, they found themselves back in that same cafe where she had told him the truth. The same table, the same window, the same soft hum of life around them. The difference was in the way they looked at each other now. More sure, more gentle, more at peace. She laughed more easily now, and he noticed how her laughter filled the spaces that once felt hollow. She reached across the table again, just like that first day, her fingers brushing against his. "You know," she said quietly, "I used to think my life ended the night Daniel died. But now I realize it just changed direction. I'll always carry him in my heart, but I think he'd want me to be happy again. And you, Michael, you make me feel alive in a way I never thought I could feel again." He felt his throat tighten. It wasn't a grand declaration, no cinematic confession, but it was real, honest. Two broken people finding the courage to open their hearts again. Months turned into a year. Emily began to smile more often, painting again with colors brighter than before. She even opened a small art studio downtown, naming it Second Light, inspired by something Michael once told her, that sometimes, after the darkest night, the light that follows isn't the same as before. It's softer, deeper, more meaningful. They never rushed things. Love, they learned, isn't about racing toward a destination. It's about walking together at a pace both hearts can bear. One evening, standing outside her studio, she looked at him and said, "I think I'm ready." He knew what she meant. She slipped the ring from her finger and placed it in a small velvet box she kept on her desk. Not as a goodbye, but as a thank you. For the love that was, and for the courage it gave her to love again. As she turned to him, tears glimmered in her eyes, not from grief, but from gratitude. He wrapped his arms around her, and for the first time they both felt something whole. Something that wasn't about replacing the past, but embracing the future. Life didn't magically become perfect. There were still quiet days, still memories that came like waves. But together, they learned to let those waves come and go, to stand hand in hand through them, and to find beauty in every fragile, fleeting moment. Years later, on a bright spring morning, they stood together in a garden filled with white roses. There was no grand ceremony, no crowd, just the two of them, and a small circle of friends. As she looked into Michael's eyes, she whispered, "Thank you for finding me when I was lost." And he replied softly, "Thank you for letting me stay." They didn't promise forever because they both knew how fragile forever could be. They simply promised to love, truly, deeply, one day at a time. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more real, heartfelt stories to life, stories about love, loss, and the courage to start again. And before you go, tell us in the comments below, do you believe love can find us again after heartbreak? Because sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin after the most painful endings.